Need my glasses.
Adanika dingia asapume.
So disrespectful, yeah. This shit's funny. Send her one invite. See if she joins.
not saying they're intentionally demoralizing and desensitizing the population for media culture and diet. I'm not saying they're intentionally trying to shut down small businesses, destroy the middle class, and transfer the majority of the wealth to the world's largest corporations. I'm not saying they're intentionally trying to divide us with fear and hatred. But if they were, would they be doing anything differently? I'm not saying they're intentionally demoralizing and desensitizing the population for media culture and diet.
Why has the president's son got the Finger Lakes tattooed on his back? Go on this guy's Twitter now and look at the leaked photos before they're deleted forever. Why has the president's son got the...
Should we ride into our horses when she comes? Should we ride into our horses when she comes? Should we ride into our horses? Should we ride into our horses? Should we ride into our horses when she comes?
Hey everybody, happy Friday. I'm here joined with the two OGs of the crypto space. We have Ben from Into the Cryptoverse and of course Rob from Digital Asset News. We're going to talk about a bunch of stuff today, but it all revolves around all of the radical changes that are going on in the world that are just, everything just seems to be happening so fast. We're going to talk about, again, the market today, where we see it going. This Bitcoin resistance of 45k. We're going to talk about this Luna and Bitcoin, what that means for the space, what it means maybe for stabilization or manipulation. We're going to talk about some commodity denomination in Bitcoin. Is it even possible? Is there enough liquidity? And then regulators, are they coming around? Will the United States and other countries embrace crypto and Bitcoin? And finally, we'll talk about the Bitcoin conference and the big announcement that is apparently groundbreaking that is planned. So before we jump in though, I do want to make sure that you guys are all subscribed. If anybody isn't, to Ben's channel and Rob's channel, with all of the information that these guys provide every single day, it will help really build a better portfolio for you in the future. So with that, how are you guys?
Great.
Yeah?
Excited to be here.
Yeah, doing great.
Well, that's great to hear. So should we just jump into the first question, and then at the end as well, everybody in the audience, we will take some of your questions as well. We have moderators managing and monitoring the chat for some good stuff. So first of all, the big thing is, what is with this 45k resistance? We got to 45.2 this morning, and I was like, oh, we broke through the glass. Can we stay above it? I'm going to give this to Ben first, and we'll rotate questions. Ben, what do you see with this 45k resistance, and do you believe there's no sell wall above? Just asks on some of the exchanges? Like, are there people waiting to get above 45k before they jump into Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think there probably are. You know, I think the tourists are mostly gone. That makes sense. Sort of with the you know, people who actually more or less believe in the asset class, or the day traders who take advantage of short-term volatility. But yeah, 45k is an important level because that's where you have the 20-week SMA, and that has been a historic, you know, really strong line in the sand, which really separates us from, you know, still having a slightly bearish leaning versus a bullish leaning. So I do think that 45 to 46k level is actually a very important level, and I do know there are a lot of people sort of looking at that from a lot of other metrics as well. I think some like cost basis on Bitcoin and whatnot, I think that's around 46k. I just think there are a significant amount of indicators that indicate the 45k to 46k region is a big barrier for us to break through. And if we break through it, I do imagine it would elicit some FOMO into the market. So, you know, if you actually look back at prior to the revenue phases, even the current one, every single time over the last like 3 or 4 months, we've gotten rejected by, you know, either the 21-week EMA or the 20-week SMA every single time so far. And that's where we are again, right? We're still at that range in between those levels, and so we find ourselves at the same spot we find ourselves over the last 3 or 4 months. And once again, we kind of like feel it, right? It's like we're so close to like busting through and seeing FOMO arrive in the market yet again, but we haven't actually seen that yet. So I do think it's an important level, and I do imagine there are some investors waiting for it to fall to buy in. With that said, I also imagine some investors that are you know, not believing it's going to break, and they might be selling or even shorting if they are too convicted on that side. But I don't ever recommend that. I think Bitcoin is more likely to trend up with time than down.
Yeah. What do you see, Rob?
Yeah.
What do your
Well,
spidey senses tell you?
My spidey sense. Well, first of all, what Ben just said about there's buyers out there, or there's sellers out there that are waiting for Bitcoin to fall. Who's that guy that's always on Stansberry Research, and he's always calling for like
Gareth Soloway?
Bitcoin to go to 10K.
20, yeah,
That-
15k, 10k. Yeah, I feel bad for him. I feel bad for those perpetual bears.
It's like constant, right? And I'm like, I wonder if this guy, if he really believes what he says, and he went and shorted on leverage. I mean, or just a short. Because right now, I gotta say, I don't think it's like the best time. I mean, as far as like resistance levels, sure. But we did a show today. We were just looking at on-chain analysis, and as far as like total addresses with balance, we're at an all-time high. As far as with Bitcoin, 40.2 million addresses, and then addresses by holdings. Actually, if you take a look for like 1 to 10 Bitcoin is growing faster, or one of the fastest ones. I think it's at all-time high too, 670 something thousand addresses, and then for your point, the 1K to 10K, 2,000 plus addresses. That's like, I think, at an all-time high. Time held has actually increased. Holders, 1 year plus, is hitting up above 25 something million addresses. So, like, you see all these things. It was just inevitable. I can't ever tell people when it's going to happen, but you just kind of see it, the metrics, and go, well, I can see where things are going. I can see where it is right now. So, I mean, time will tell, but I think we're in the right path.
So everything seems to me to point to a supply crunch. We know it's going to happen. We just don't know it's 3 months from now, 3 years from now. But there's going to come a time when, you know, the alarm bell is going to go off. There's going to be like, say, 500,000 Bitcoin on exchanges. That's kind of my tipping point, and that's going to cause FOMO like we have never seen before. Do you guys embrace such a theory at all, or do you think it'll just dwindle on exchanges? Everyone will go peer to peer, and there'll never be that supply crunch panic? Up to you first.
For me, so like, I mean, we talk about this every so often. I use Crypto Quant for this one, and just take a look at the dashboard and just to see, and it looks like Bitcoin is just continues to be pulled off the exchanges again and again and again. And then Ethereum actually is even faster than that. So if we take a look at it and go, well, but the problem is that we've been hearing this for so long. It's going to be a supply crunch, it's going to be a supply crunch. And it seems like it just kind of, maybe it's just like maybe it's like a recession. Like people keep talking about a recession and like, oh, it's going to come until the day that it actually does come. So maybe it's one of those things where there has to be a tipping point where you can't have so much demand and have a dwindling supply before it actually falls off. But I mean, if you look at it, I think it's like at a 3-year low. 40, where are we? 2,300,000 Bitcoin off all exchanges. So I can see it happening. And the question, of course, always is when.
What do you see, Ben? Do you believe that crunch could happen?
Yeah, I would agree. I think that it's just a matter of when. You know, even the bears, even I think the Bitcoin bears who are convinced it's going to go down, even most of them would still argue that they're long-term bullish. You know, so it's like you have the bulls and the bears, but even the bears are still long-term bullish. So I do think it's just a matter of time before we ultimately hit it. I guess the ultimate question is does that happen in 3 months or does it happen in 3 years? But yeah, I do think eventually we kind of saw something similar like happen in late 2020 and early 2021 where there was just like a scramble to get all the crypto because Bitcoin was going to 100K and ETH was going to 10K and everyone started buying. Yeah, it's just a matter of time before we get there. And again, as I mentioned earlier, looking at some of the on-chain stuff, because it's kind of where you can see some of this occur. We're at the long-term stage. We're at the hodler stage. Right? The people that are buying now are basically the people that just buy no matter what, to some degree, except for at mania phases. So, as long as these longer-term investors keep acting in the same way and just keep DCAing, I imagine eventually we'll get to the point where we will get to that supply crunch and people will buy.
Awesome. Let's switch gears. Talk about the big event over the last week. And I know, Ben, you look at wallets, and I know you do too as well, Rob. Let's talk about Do Kwon and what he is doing with his Luna Bitcoin buy, how they are trying to pivot away from an algorithmic stablecoin to a Bitcoin-backed, Bitcoin collateralized stablecoin. I think the idea itself is genius. It's not new, but definitely their approach is. And the trajectory of UST and Luna has really been very, very impressive in the last year. Now, we modeled yesterday that if UST flips USDC, Luna's going to $250. If it flips Tether, it's going to $480. And if Do Kwon invests $10 billion in Bitcoin, then it's going above $1,000 because of the burn mechanism. I'd like to get your guys of, your sense of, are you tracking this? Are you looking at those wallets? Are you looking at the 125 million being transferred every single day and resulting in buying, and the fact that they now own, by my estimates, about 38,000 Bitcoin? Has this taken you by surprise, and do you think it's part of the reason that the price has gone up over the last week or so? Rob, you first.
Yeah, so, well, first of all, I saw your video, James. Did you say $80,000?
80,000 theoretical price if the supply of Luna goes down by 99.9%. Basically, it's a finite supply. But who's going to be buying Luna at 79,000 to drive it there? That's the question. But theoretically, for the market cap of Luna to hit that price, it's only 350 billion, which is 5, 6, 7 x what Tether is doing.
Yeah, I can see it. I mean, someone's going to buy at the top because that's what FOMO's all about. But I just found it interesting because there was this timeline for when this all came about, and that was tweeted out. There's a nice graphic, and it looked at like 18th of March. Do Kwon was on this Twitter Spaces, and he was talking about, we're going to invest into Bitcoin, and we're going to put $3 billion into it. And then it kind of just tapered away. And he's like, I think I said more than I should have said. And then, he tweets out something else cryptic, and then all of a sudden you get these, was it two or $125 million that they were investing?
Yeah, they've done 3 tranches
at like
so
different
far.
stages.
Yeah.
I mean, usually people don't do that. They don't say, hey, we're going to buy a bunch of Bitcoin, and then they do it. Usually it's like they do it, and then they say, hey, we bought a bunch of Bitcoin. So I just found it very odd the way it was done. But, I mean, it didn't really move the price too much until it started to, everybody started to figure out this 125 million. So maybe I just find it interesting timing. That's all I can tell you.
Yeah, well, technically his first buy was, by my calculations, the 21st of March. And at that time, the price was just under 41K. And now it's 44 and a half. So I estimate every $125 billion tranche, every 125 million he spends drives up the price between $250 and $450. So the math is kind of working. That's based on the Tesla $1.5 billion multiplier. Ben, what do you see, and do you track the Luna stuff at all? Are you fascinated by it like I am?
I've started tracking it. I'm not as fascinated, but I have started tracking it a little bit. Actually, on an unrelated or a somewhat related note, whale number 3 that we follow, he offloaded 15 Bitcoin at 41K. So instead of owning $5.66 billion worth of Bitcoin, now they own a paltry $5.53 billion worth of Bitcoin. But anyways, yeah, I mean, with regards to the Luna stuff, I think the biggest thing that I think that's interesting about this story is how does it affect, like the Bitcoin maxis and stuff, when you have literally like altcoin projects that are buying Bitcoin and kind of helping fuel the Bitcoin narrative. I do have to imagine that it is helping drive the price up, not only from the actual buy, but probably from the narrative, right? I mean, a lot of times markets are fueled by a narrative, and if you see someone that's buying a lot of Bitcoin, that might also help encourage other people to have more confidence to then go out and buy more Bitcoin if they see other people are putting in a lot more money. So I do think it's probably having some effect. I am somewhat, I don't know that I could see like $1,000 Luna in the short term. I do think like in order to see those kinds of things, we would have to see a Bitcoin that's, probably a market cap of Bitcoin between say like 2 and 4 trillion. Would probably support altcoin prices that are, in the few hundred billions. I think like Ethereum right now is at like 370 billion or something like that. So for Luna to go to $1,000, I believe the current market cap on Luna is what, like 30 billion. So it would actually put it around Ether's market capitalization, which is not an entire, I mean, it's not impossible, but I don't think it's very likely. So can Luna get to $1,000? Maybe, but I do think that in order for altcoins to get to several hundred billion, like the $300 to $500 billion range, we would need to see a new paradigm shift from Bitcoin first to see it, go to that like $2 to $4 trillion mark, which would more or less put the price of Bitcoin between like $1 to $200,000. So you first, I think, need a Bitcoin valuation to support altcoin valuations in that range. That's my opinion.
Yeah, no, and we spent a lot of time trying to model it out, and that key area is for the $100,000 Bitcoin. But it's fascinating. We all know fiat is going to hell in a handbasket. I think, is that an American term? I'm not even sure.
Hell in a handbasket, yeah.
But like falling by, debasing, I should say, by at least 15% per year. And the pre-fiat world, where the dollar and other currencies were backed by gold, they've all gone away. And where are people going to park money? And this is why I see this whole thing being kind of like a game theory on steroids moment. Backing it with the world's most pristine asset, a stablecoin that could replace currencies. That's what I think is, it's a long shot, but if he pulls it off, it's incredible. And I can't remember, but Ethereum is now bigger than MasterCard market cap as well today. Speaking of the market cap of Ethereum, it's bigger than MasterCard, and I think a lot bigger than Bank of America and other players too. So it is massive, but everything could be possible, if we get to this 10 trillion, 30 trillion market cap, it's going to happen as well. We just don't know when. So good. Let's jump to topic number 3. And this is the one that's everybody's kind of talking about right now, is commodity Bitcoin denomination. It goes back as well. It ties into the fact that fiat is going to zero, debasing like crazy. What will really be valuable in the future, and that is hard assets. What are those hard assets? Things that people need, like for electric vehicles, nickel and aluminium and all sorts of stuff. Energy, oil, gas. And the world has now realized, we really need this. We're not ready to go to be a complete green world. And how do you share those hard assets for another hard asset? do you sell your precious oil for something that's debasing at 15% in a reserve that can be confiscated, or do you want something else? So all the talk right now is about who's denominating in what, who's getting paid in what, digital yuan versus rubles versus Bitcoin, and the question is, do you think it'll happen? And is there sufficient liquidity to pull it off? I don't think there is right now for the energy markets because they're far bigger than the Bitcoin market. But where do you guys see that going? Ben, to you first.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I'm not confident that there's enough liquidity to pull it off at the current time, but it is. I think it is a future narrative. You know, I mean, every cycle for Bitcoin, every bull run is fueled by some narrative, and I think that narrative is just waiting to be grabbed onto, and you know, to take us to the next level. One of the things I was actually rewatching a talk back in 2013 about, you know, the neutrality of Bitcoin. And it doesn't matter what your political views are. It doesn't matter. It's just a neutral currency, and that's one of the reasons why you can imagine there are going to be more and more people that want to sort of default to something a bit more neutral, so that they're not as susceptible to sanctions and whatnot. You know, so I mean, it does sort of seem like the natural progression of some things that'll ultimately head into that direction. We're probably not there yet, though. Even if we would want to be, I don't really think we're at that stage yet. But it does seem like something that is ultimately coming, and it'll be interesting to see how other countries deal with that. You know, and I think that's like a really touchy thing right now, like the regulatory hurdles that we're facing. This probably leads to some of the most bearish sentiments that you know, sometimes you see are just regulatory concerns, like, you know, when are we going to get certain things, when are we going to see regulatory clarity? And I think they're sort of figuring it out, because, you know, how does it affect them in the future, and whatnot. So yeah, to answer your question, I do think it is a future narrative that will probably, you know, contribute to Bitcoin moving higher, but probably a little premature at this point.
Yeah. Okay. Rob, what's your view of the world? And what do you do with your personal oil reserves? Do you sell them for Bitcoin or for cash?
So, wasn't it just a couple of years ago when oil was like in the tank and no one was buying it? It didn't seem like there was much.
Negative. Oil
Yeah.
fell under the cost of storing it, which takes you back to the whole the cost of storing commodities and moving commodities. It's immense, and it's a big factor. That's where Bitcoin's also another game changer. It doesn't cost anything to move or store.
Yeah, and then and we talked about this last one where I'd heard a story about Goldman Sachs, one of the CIOs, who said, "Hey, we're going to be in a commodity super cycle." And I was like, "Yeah, I've heard that before." Now, of course, here we take a look at all the prices are just going through the roof. But as far as like, you know, using Bitcoin and then purchasing that for oil or electricity or things like that, it's an area that can work out. And we were talking about this before the show. We talked about the Janet Yellen interview, which just aired today on I think it was CNBC, where the person who was sitting down with Janet Yellen said, "Hey, so how do you feel this narrative is working out? Because people are offering to pay for Russian oil in Bitcoin. How do you feel that, you know, as far as crypto and digital assets?" And she goes, and like we said, she actually softened to the idea, and she's like, "Well, we need a little more regulation, but we can see how powerful it can actually be." And, you know, we were tasked by President Biden to, you know, create a commission and actually look at these things. So we're going to, you know, it sounded like she was a little bit more receptive to the idea of crypto. But I mean, like right now, I mean, the market cap is under a trillion. How much can you really have unless you're whale number 3 to really, you know, buy these things? It would have to shoot up dramatically. But I mean, to Ben's point, it is neutral. And that's why, like, when we talk about the CBDCs and how each country's going to have one, I don't see us using digital rubles and digital yuans and stuff like that. I see us using a digital currency that's inert. So
Exactly. And that goes back to the whole Luna and UST potential. You know, truly something that's backed and can grow, and decent, and is safe, etc. as we go forward. So, interesting time. It's funny. Topic number 4. You mentioned Janet Yellen, Rob. We'll go to you first on this one. Are the regulators coming around? Is the United States, for example, embracing innovation? A lot of talk last week, the week before, about Europe trying to ban proof of work mining and stuff like that. But the whole stance of, okay, a couple of things going on. One, politicians now realize, I think it's somewhere between 50 million and 75 million Americans hold Bitcoin or crypto. So if you try ban it or quash it or make life hell for it, you're going to make yourself pretty unpopular at the polls. Second of all, the whole narrative of crypto is innovation. You have to embrace it. You can't turn your back on it. It's no longer the boogeyman. What do you think about all that? Is there hope?
So there's two sides of that same story. So as far as regulation goes, I'm under the opinion that we need regulation for the institutions that come in and know exactly where they stand. You need to know the rules so you know how to get around the rules. And that's really what it comes down to. So there's two examples we talked about today. One was India. They just passed a law that taxes every single Indian 30% capital gains tax. And then if you have any losses, you cannot use that against your taxes. You cannot gift any of the cryptocurrencies that you buy. And then there's this thing called TDS, 1%. So everything that you buy, you're going to get taxed 1% right at the time that you purchase those cryptos. So if you're a regular trader, you're going to be screwed. So there's that part. And this was actually given out by the finance minister, Mall or something. And she said, we're going to do this because we want to have crypto. And pretty much in a way that she said it was like, pretty much she says like, well, at least we didn't ban it, but we're gonna tax you. So there's one part where it's a little bit of regulation that's a little bit heavy-handed. Then on the flip side, we talked about the EU, the MICA or whatever that the parliament that was passing it, and it actually passed through the first step without the provision of proof of work being in that law. So they actually totally scrapped it and said there is no banning of proof of work. Not that they were going to ban crypto, but they were looking to reduce, heavy hand, or totally eliminate proof of work, which would pretty much eliminate the miners and Bitcoin. And then they were trying to move that forward. There was such an outcry, they scrapped it, but the bill goes through without it. So there's two sides of it. And will we get it right? I don't know. Like I've always said, I mean, we got the internet right, in my personal opinion. We passed Law 230 in the 90s, which didn't allow for people to actually get sued if they were running a website for people, or something that people would say on their website. And that allowed the internet to kind of sprout and move forward. Can they screw up? Sure. But it just comes down to, hopefully, education. That's me being naive.
Ben, how do you see this playing out?
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like over the years we've seen, you know, it go from a really critical stance, and then you'll start to see some politicians sort of soften up their stance a little bit. It could be because they realize, and I'm not just talking about, you know, her, but it could just be related to them wanting to make sure their poll numbers are up. And I mean, that's like, and you have midterm elections and whatnot. It's something to consider for a lot of people. You know, where do you take a stand on this? And there's a lot of people that feel very strongly about crypto. I mean, a lot of popular people in the world are very pro-crypto. A lot of famous people are pro-crypto. So do you want to be the politician that's coming out and being anti-crypto? So I think that there is definitely hope for regulation. And I do hope it'll go the right way. They've even some of the recent stuff they put out, like they even specifically say that they're looking for guidance from experts, right? They're not just putting out a law. Even though there have been a couple close calls, and we were like a few months ago with staking and whatnot, we were all worried, okay, is the staking stuff just going to become absolutely banned in the United States? We weren't really sure, but I do think that they're struggling to get it right. They haven't absolutely destroyed it yet. And I have hope that they will continue to do more or less the right thing, but I'm sure it's not going to be an easy battle. I have to imagine that they want us to stay, you know, that the United States in general would like to see us stay, you know, ahead of things, even though on some fronts that's not true, especially with things like the SPY ETF. But when you're talking about like innovation and wanting to really grow and be the leader, if you destroy it, you know, when it's kind of in its infancy, then you're not going to be a leader later on. So you have to consider the consequences. I think more politicians are starting to consider that, and I've seen a lot of them come around from being very anti-crypto to then asking questions about it, and even with the EU vote, by the way, the other day. About, you know, banning proof of work and whatnot. There were some of them on Twitter were talking about it, and one of them even said, who voted against it, by the way, he was saying, you know, can I talk with someone rather than just getting shouted at as to why I'm a terrible person for voting for it? Can we have like a reasonable discussion about like you know, what are the benefits of it? I think that's really the way to go. You know, some people they don't like what they don't know, and so their natural response is to say, oh yeah, like let's ban it, and then they slowly start to learn about it because people call them out on it, and then they start to change it. So I am optimistic, but it will probably be a fairly bumpy road.
Yeah, good stuff. Oh, right, there's another big one going around that everybody's talking about, at least I think everybody's talking about. Cannot be confirmed or denied, but the Bitcoin conference always wants to set up a big announcement. Last year was El Salvador. Now the organizers of this conference are saying we have something even bigger than El Salvador. What do you guys think it could be? Rob, you first. Okay. So if it's bigger than El Salvador, it's either a bigger country or some other huge announcement.
Elon Musk and President Joe Biden come out to the main stage holding hands and say that they are all going to renewable energy, which will actually fuel all the Bitcoin miners and will be the reserve currency of the United States. That's just a guess. I don't know. Who knows what it could be? A lot of people will say, because we're used to the things in the past, right? El Salvador was the big announcement. Jack Mallers came out and made that big play and said it's going to be legal tender. So everybody's thinking about Turkey being the next one to actually come in and say now it's going to be legal tender over here or another country. But in all honesty, I mean, I have no idea what it's going to be, but maybe it could be the one thing that could actually be a nice little catalyst to push us even forward than what we're at right now. So I'm just guessing.
Interesting. What do you think, Ben? What it could be?
My first guess was just another country. I mean, it's hard to how do you top it? I mean,
yeah.
Like if a country, you know, El Salvador buying Bitcoin, what do you say that can top it? Other than another country buying Bitcoin. I mean, I suppose there are things, but it's just that would be the natural thing. Because, you know, one data point is a fluke, but two kind of sets a trend. And if you see a second country come in and say they're also buying Bitcoin, then you could argue, hey, look, it's not just a one-off fluke that El Salvador is doing and they're going to regret it. Now you have a second country coming in and saying the same thing. And then are we going to start to see the dominoes fall, right? Like one country after another starts to declare it in the same way. So yeah, I think it's probably something related to a country declaring it, but honestly, I have no idea. I mean, I have absolutely no idea, but I will be eager to find out what it is.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because there are so many fiat currencies now on the brink, and then you have countries like Ecuador, etc., that are holding to the dollar. And I think there's going to be that avalanche happening all at once. You know, all of a sudden, we just don't know quite where. It'll be fascinating. It could also be something lightning, like strike, something from our friend at Square, Jack Dorsey, or something with Jack Mallers. Maybe along the lines of your theory, it would be Jack Dorsey and Jack Mallers holding hands.
I'll take it.
And doing something very big together, you know, empowering everybody to be able to mine at home with any excess electricity they have or horsepower in their house. Who knows? It'll be super, super interesting. Okay, let me see. We're going to go now, if you guys are okay with that, to some audience questions. There's a couple of good ones out there. And we kind of went through what's going on today pretty quickly. And Bitcoin is at 44,238 as we speak. So the markets have fallen, the alts have fallen hard. They were doing really well over the last couple of days. Took a big hit. So the first question is from Remy the Whippet. To all of you, if we do break and hold 46k support and trend up in April, early May, do you still believe it'll take us into 2023 per Ben, the long elongated cycle? Or do we have a shot at a new all-time high earlier this year or later this year? Where do you guys see this going? Rob, to you first, and then we'll go to Ben.
Well, first of all, nobody knows the answer. Crypto is very volatile. I think we all can say that. What we think things are going to go goes the opposite way. It's like it happens every single time. However, having said that, I did this video, when in May, walk away, or when in May, or sell in May, go away. And we took a look at the historical portion as far as, you know, how things have done, as far not just with crypto, but just with the regular traditional markets. And there was a great article from Forbes it took place from 1929 to 2020. And statistically or historically, those months of June, July, August, September are the time that really don't do too well. And then there's a rebound in October, November, December. So like, do I think that we could go above 46K? Sure. And then from what I understand, there's not that much resistance and it might be clear skies. But to hit an all-time high for this year, unless that announcement is something crazy great, or unless we get some solid regulation that says, okay, this is a commodity, this is a security, this is a currency, and then we can also hopefully see a little bit a peace treaty in Ukraine, I don't see us hitting those all-time highs, because we need a little bit more stability. That's just me being a wet blanket. That's it.
Ben, what about you? Because we know that going from 45 to 67, 68K isn't a big stretch for Bitcoin. It can do that in 5 days on occasion. Where do you see all this going? I know April is going to be a positive month. Looks like April is almost even being front run so far.
Right.
What do you see?
Yeah, it is kind of being front run to some degree, I think. Rob, his comment about, May, June, July, I mean, I think that's accurate, historically speaking, right? If you look at the 90-day ROI on average of Bitcoin, in May, it's 1.38. June, it's 1.11. July, it's 1.15. In August, it's 1.51. And then it starts to move higher closer to the end of the year. So I think that's pretty... I mean, again, like anything can happen in any given year, but statistically, the middle of the year doesn't tend to be that great. And we actually saw that last year. Remember, like May, June, July, pretty dull months, right? Like there wasn't a whole lot going on during that time, and we didn't really start to pick up until later on in the year. So, yeah, I mean, could we see new all-time highs this year? Yeah, I think we could, but if we are, it probably wouldn't be until later in the year. Like probably not in the second quarter, if I had to guess, just because I think there's just a lot of things we have to do first. Like we need to break above these levels at some point, so like let's imagine best case scenario, we do that like this coming week or something. A lot of times when Bitcoin breaks above these levels, it then kind of explodes above it for a few weeks. And then, so, going to like, that would mean going to something like 50K, 52K, above where we break out from. And that would really elicit that FOMO that probably people would bring a lot of people back to the market. And then at that point, what you often see is then you see a pullback back to that band, the 20-week estimated 21-week EMA, to then confirm that it is actually bullish and it's not just like a false breakout. And those things can take, a couple months to break above it, then go above it, and then come back down, test it as support, hold it as support, and then ultimately trend higher. That usually takes a few months. So I don't really think we'll see new all-time highs in the second quarter. It's possible later. I think it is possible later this year. I still think, though, I mean, we the 45K level, the 45 to 46K level is a very important level for us to get past. I mean, if we just get rejected here, then it's going to shift that timeline out, because then we just have to go back down, and then we have to again work up the courage again to go break it in a few weeks or something. So it is possible, but if it happens, my guess is that it won't actually happen until later.
Good. And my take is, I did say a couple weeks ago on this channel, I wouldn't be surprised if we hit 50K in April. 40K was a lock. We hit that already. So we'll see where it goes. If some of the accumulation continues at the rate it's accumulating,
I have no idea what is going on over
we'll see.
there.
Maybe the news out of Miami is outstanding. Okay, next question. This is from Future Millionaire. That name is really cool, by the way, Future Millionaire. And I just read a statistic, I think the other day. There are something like 23 million millionaires in the US today. So everybody stretch that goal. Being a millionaire is no longer very much anymore. So you might have to change your name to Future Billionaire. Anyway, back to business. Afternoon, gentlemen. I've previously asked James's opinion on GBTC. It's a Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. What do you guys think? Long term, I'm enjoying the current discount. How do you guys see GBTC playing out? Maybe conversion to a spot, etc.
This is all Ben's thing. I know it's on a discount. I know that they're really trying for that spot ETF. That's but this is you and Ben's area.
Yeah, I actually spoke to someone about this because I think the most fascinating part to me, and it's possible that I'm missing something, but I've spoken to some people about it, and I keep asking, what happens if it gets converted to a spot ETF? Does that discount immediately get arbitraged away, and therefore does that mean buying it now is like basically you're basically taking on the risk of it being converted to a spot ETF or not? And if it gets converted and that does play out, then it could be a great play to make. On the other hand, if it doesn't, or it doesn't go exactly how I think, then I guess you run the risk of basically just trading something that isn't actually the asset, but it's like a premium or the discount to the asset. One of the things I've tracked before is like the price of Bitcoin versus the premium. And this, by the way, was back before it was negative, when it was actually like positive and can be. And especially on ECHE, we would see the discount go up hundreds of % and whatnot. So I mean, at some point, you're almost trading like a different asset because it can behave a lot differently. But I do think that buying it now is basically, you're risking. The bet is that you're thinking it's going to get converted to a SPY ETF. So you just need to figure out like what do you think the likelihood of that is to happen. And one of the things that we mentioned before is, could that happen in 2022? I know at one point they were saying that could happen. Now I've seen articles saying 2023. It's just the same thing. So we saw articles like this in 2017, 2018 as well. Not necessarily with respect to that one, but just in general with respect to ETFs, like a spot ETF in general. It's always 6 to 12 months away, and then when the time gets closer, we didn't see something else that says another 6 to 12 months away. So I think it's a longer term play if you're gonna do it.
Yeah, there was a release from Bloomberg. They are convinced it'll happen early 2023 at the latest. I'm still wouldn't be surprised if we saw something between June and September of this year, especially with how the narrative is changing within the regulators. So fingers crossed. I think there's a lot of pressure as well for Gary Gensler to do it because monies are being drained outside, and it's unfair to force people to seek out other channels when every other country in the world is allowing it. So a question from Dave: any thoughts on staking Solana with Marinade Finance? I personally don't use it. It is audited. It seems like a decent platform. Are you guys familiar with Marinade at all?
No, I was going to ask you, so here's a good question for everybody. Where do you stake your Solana? Because I got a good amount of it. I'm just not staking it.
A couple of places. I stake it on Bison Trails on the Phantom Wallet. I stake a little bit on Exodus, and I also stake quite a bit of it now on Celsius. So I think Celsius is the safe place to park. So three options.
Perfect.
But you guys aren't familiar with Marinade, but Marinade, I do know it is a good place, so I wouldn't have a problem with that, Dave, at all. Mr. Chili's, to Rob and James question: is there any scenario where it's good to accept our rewards and sell tokens on Celsius? Rob.
Is there any provision for getting and selling? Like, why not get Celsius tokens, or you don't really like it?
Well, I think people are worried about upside. It had a bit of a flat year, but I just got off the AMA with Alex, and their inflation rate is actually minus 0.54%. So it's actually a deflationary token. They are looking to increase a lot more of the benefits for token holders, and I think a good way to accept it, if you leverage Celsius for all of its good and have benefits paid, you can get a lot more bang for your buck, especially on the borrowing and lending side. Do you use any of that as well? Because I know you have borrowed a little bit. You made it very public. Borrowing from Puerto Rico.
Yeah, I borrowed a good amount of. I put up collateral for Ethereum and Bitcoin. It's been a pretty smooth process, except for the fact that a couple of margin calls here and there, but you just have to recollateralize, and you don't want to get liquidated ever, because when you do loans, it's not a taxable event. But if you get liquidated, then it's all taxable. So never get liquidated. Just always answer those margin calls. It's pretty simple. So like as far as like the Celsius token, I know some people say, well, it's a weird thing, because the more Celsius token that you hold, I think the more of a boost that you get for the token that you hold on Celsius. So to me, it's kind of like, why not just hold the Celsius token for, even if it's minimal amount, and then to actually increase the boost for what you want to do. But then again, it comes down to what do you want to do? How comfortable are you with putting on Celsius as far as another exchange, or just putting on straight cold storage? I don't put everything in Celsius or Voyager or Kraken. I put things around and also have it on my cold storage device. But then you really have to think about, like, well, do I want to gain some yield in an easy way? Well, if you do that, just know that they're going to take those and they will rehypothecate, and that is how the actual system works. So it's really, again, what you want to do. But as far as a Celsius token, I don't see a problem with getting the rewards in Celsius and then actually increasing the boost. But if you max out, now you have to take a look at tokenomics and see if you really want to keep Celsius. I used to really love Celsius as far as the token. I just like the platform. It works out pretty well. The token, sure, it might do well. Who knows?
Good. Okay, next question is from Just Engelsman. This is a good one for you, Ben. Hey guys, thank you for all the authentic content you put out there. Thumbs up. What is the chance of Bitcoin losing its dominance in the next few years, considering it already lost 50% market share since 2013? So Bitcoin dominant question. Your wheelhouse, Ben.
Yeah, it's a good question, you know. I like Bitcoin. It's the blue, I think Bitcoin and ETH are the blue chips. With that said, you can't look at the Bitcoin dominance chart and not see that it's in a macro downtrend. It is what it is, you know. And one way to look at it is sort of like a bubble. If you flip it the other way, if you look at the altcoin dominance, you'll sort of see like it pops up and then it comes back down, but it never really goes back down to where it was before it made that move back up there to the upside. So I think the Bitcoin dominance is ultimately heading lower, but I keep thinking to myself, and I've thought this for the last 6 months, for full disclosure, that the Bitcoin dominance should be a little bit higher at the current time, even though I still think it's gonna eventually head lower. Like over the next few years, I could see it going to like 25% or 30% or something like that, which does seem relatively low, but it also made it to like a 30% dominance, 35% dominance, something like that back in early 2018. So it's not exactly that unheard of, right, for it to go to those lower dominance levels. But yeah, if your question is over to the next few years, like if you're thinking like 3 years out, I would argue, yeah, like we're definitely, the dominance is definitely in a downtrend, and so I would expect it to ultimately trend lower. In the short term is where it becomes a little bit more unsure, and the reason is because a lot of times, in order, you notice like today, right? Look at all the alt Bitcoin valuations today. Look at all the alt Ether valuations today. They're all down. Mostly. I mean, again, maybe you have a pet project that's not, but listen, I mean, the reason why they're down is because Bitcoin is not past that 45K level, right? It hasn't gotten above that threshold that we want to get above. And when it gets rejected by it, like it is at least in the short term, doesn't mean we can't move up tomorrow. What happens? Like you see the altcoin valuations against Bitcoin bleed immediately. They give back those Bitcoin gains. A lot of altcoins are down 40 or 50% against Bitcoin. We like to cherry pick how they're up against the local bottom on the USD valuation. They're down 40 or 50% against Bitcoin. Not everyone. I mean, I'm not talking to the Luna holders or anything like that, but most of them, right? Most of them are down significantly. So we're sort of at that phase where in the short term, you know, you really need Bitcoin to get back above this level that James pointed out at the very beginning of the show, to hold that level as support, and then you'll probably see altcoins move against Bitcoin a little bit. But remember, there's one scenario where they don't, even when Bitcoin's above that level. So if that scenario plays out, it's basically if Bitcoin gets above it and then goes parabolic like it did in late 2020, early 2021, alts will likely still bleed against Bitcoin. So you basically need to see Bitcoin above that level and then getting kind of boring. And then you would likely see altcoins rally against Bitcoin. Because there's definitely a different sentiment between, say, like, you know, like April of 2021, when Bitcoin's going sideways, and at more bullish levels versus, say, more bearish levels and going sideways.
Yeah, and my take as well is sometimes it can be a bit misleading. Even the term cryptocurrency is a silly term into itself, but it's like having car manufacturers bundled with washing machine makers, bundled with people that make apples or blueberries or whatever else. It is ridiculous. Bitcoin is unto a class of itself. This whole Bitcoin dominance thing, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day because you're comparing apples to oranges. Bitcoin will do very well. If I calculated that if the money that the millennials inherit from the boomers over the next 10 years, if they just put 2.5% of that into Bitcoin, Bitcoin's going straight to $12 million. And that's just a fact of life. That's just mathematics. And that doesn't even talk about any of the other stuff we've spoken about. You know, institutions or high net worth individuals. That's just money. So the future's very bright. Now, the other thing is when you look at the layer ones that are going after $400 trillion industries like financial services and DeFi and everything else, that also is huge. Think of all the FX money, think of all the banking, all the traditional. That is all ripe for disruption. And if, you know, the layer ones just get 2% of that market, their valuations will explode too. So think of having 20 Ethereums out there. 20 Ethereums at, say, 400 billion a pop, that will far exceed Bitcoin. So as Ben says, the macro trend is going to go down for these assets, but don't think of it in that regard, because it can be misleading and it can cause you to make some financial mistakes. That's what I would say. Any final thoughts on that, Rob?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, you know, when we were talking about Luna, you know, it's like, and we're saying, well, it could go to $1,000 or go to 80,000 or whatever else. Like, think about it this way: in 3 or 4 years, someone might actually stumble across this video and watch it and probably just laugh their head off, because they're like, can you imagine that they didn't know that Luna was going to go to this high and Bitcoin's going to this high? And I'll give you an example. I watched this. It was a video with Roger Ver from 2012. And I just rewatched it like a month ago, and he was talking about how Bitcoin's. The way he was talking is just hilarious. He's like, you know, Bitcoin right now is only $100, but I think if we really work hard, we can get it to 1,000, and maybe if we can do that, we can get to 1,500. But we'll see how it all works out, and hopefully we just give it. And it was just hilarious. I'm like, this guy in 2012, $100, you know. And then of course, and also he did say one last thing. He goes, and an ETF is right around the corner. So, like, I looked at all those things. I'm like, man, people are gonna watch these videos and be like, these guys, they thought they knew, but they didn't know how high it was gonna go. Not financial advice, just an opinion, but who knows where it's all going.
Well, I remember telling my buddies at the yacht club in 2019, I guaranteed them Bitcoin was going to hit $113,000 by the year 2030. I said guaranteed.
Yeah.
And they laughed at me like I was an idiot. Here we are. So yeah, the whole market cap is going to go to 30 trillion, then 100 trillion, then 200 trillion. But remember, the denominator is shrinking as well, and that's why we know the price is going up. The question is, how exponential will it be, and how quickly will the denominator debase? Because measuring things like crypto and Bitcoin against the dollar is just a silly metric in the first place. So everything in the monetary world is broken. You gotta rethink everything and think, as Jeff Booth would say, in exponential terms. Otherwise, there's no point. And that's the hard part. That's the hard part for everybody to wrap their heads around. Anyway, next question. It's from Miko Man. He says, just want to thank you guys for all your info and hard work. You changed my life and many others. And I won't mention the word they said after that. So big thank you guys for that. And let's see if we could do one more random question, because it's Friday. Jack says an ETF is right around the corner. Yeah, they already are. Let me see. Adam Bristow, InvestOunce has given you a recent emphasis on energy market sustainability. Would you consider looking at an energy utility projects with energy like EWT? It'd be interesting to look and talk about. I've looked at a couple of them way back last year, but I didn't find anything interesting. And I am very particular about what I invest in. So, and I think less is more too. So, do you guys know EWT?
Energy web token or something like that?
Yeah.
Is that what it is?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's been around for quite some time and never really took off, couldn't really gain traction. We tried it in Australia, couldn't really get it to go. It might work now, but I haven't followed it.
Yeah. Let me see. I don't know if you know anything about that, Ben, but yeah, there's just
Yeah, no, I don't really have informed.
and there's so much. Literally, I used to say 95% of all tokens are garbage. I'm upping that to about 98%. Yeah, tokenomics do not look good at all. It is in the top 300, just made it in there. But again, risky stuff.
I got to tell you, James, it was something that you said in one of your shows. You talked about, because you were talking about gaming or something. We were talking about gaming one time. You said, it really doesn't matter. Just you can get into gaming and metaverse, but take a look at what it's built on. and there was this article, PUBG. PUBG apparently was like this huge multiplayer game online a couple years ago, and then Fortnite came over. But they are pairing up with Solana Studios to do a play-to-earn game. And I'm like, look, you can get into that, you can get into the metaverse in the world, but look what it's built on. And look at all those different layer 1 solutions. Maybe it's just easier to do it that way. And
Exactly.
maybe that's the one that'll stick around.
Go back to the San Francisco gold rush, where pretty much I am now, is the only people that made money during that gold rush were the people selling denim jeans and picks and shovels. And that's what a layer 1 is. So, Ben, I don't know if you have a similar analogy, Ben, for that type of thing, like where you invest is the same thing. It's Bitcoin, it's Ethereum, it's picks and shovels and pristine assets. You don't dabble in the metaverse or any of that stuff, do you? Cash grabs, as you say.
No. I mean, I immediately stick to the larger cap stuff. At least publicly, anyways. I'll leave it at that.
Oh, so you are a secret degen. That's an interesting leak.
We're all just a little degen. Come on, I get in little metaverse PDE games. They're out there. There's gonna be a good one. There's gonna be a couple good ones. It just depends which one it is. Cash grab.
Exactly. Well, with that, everybody, I say we are all degens. And funny thing about the degen is that Do Kwon guy betting somebody $1 million on the performance of Luna on Twitter, and then another guy $10 million. He's got $11 million running on the line, and he's very confident Luna will be higher than it is today a year from now. And I think the strike price was like $92, and $11 million is an escrow. So that's major league degen action too. So
Good for Mike Novogratz. I mean, that guy picked them, didn't he? Ethereum, then Luna. Jeez.
Yeah. Well, he had a couple of losers in his basket too, so not all winners. But you know, it's just a fascinating world. And again, everything is going up, but some things will go up a lot more than others. So everybody out there, do your homework, be in the quality names. Any final parting thoughts for the team? I always like to say, what do you see happening this weekend? And the last 2 weekends, I was hyper bullish because I see us in a macro uptrend. The question is, can we break through 45? And I think perhaps if somebody out there like a Do Kwon has another 125 million to burn, or 250 million, or 375 million, we're going right through to maybe 48k.
Yeah.
What do you guys think? Sentiment for the weekend? Positive, negative? Keep your seatbelt on.
You know, it's interesting. If you look back exactly 3 years ago today, we were right around $4,000. We rallied up to the 20-week estimate around 4,000, and then once we broke through it, we then went straight to 5,000. And yeah, here we are 3 years later. We're now at 40k, and we're trying to get up to 50k. So I do think there's going to be a big battle on our hands over the next couple of weeks. I don't really know which way it's going to go. I always try to lean more optimistic, but I've also, I feel like the better way to put it for me is I just am somewhat apathetic. Not that I don't want it to go up. It's just like we've seen it so many times the last few months get rejected. Hopefully this time is different and we break through it. Eventually we will, right? So I imagine it'll be a pretty big battle, and the Bulls and the Bears will fight it out, and we'll see who's victorious. Back in, I still remember in 2019, a lot of us thought it was going to get rejected, and we were going to go down, and we just shot up to $14,000, over the next like 3 or 4 months. So we'll see what happens. And by the way, it was actually to the day. I mean, it literally broke out like the first week of April. We rallied up to it in March, and then the first week of April, we broke out. So we're leading up to something, right? We're leading up to something, a very big move. You can actually see that on a lot of different metrics. It seems like there's a lot of different things that are saying a big move is coming. It's just a matter of which way it breaks, but it should be pretty volatile. And regardless, even if it breaks down, it just sets up more opportunities, as long as you agree with the assumption that Bitcoin comes up in time.
And I just saw the weirdest thing flash up in my trading view. So those of you who are superstitious and think 4 means death, because the Chinese word sounds like death, but it's not. I just had 44444.85 show up on my trading view. 5 4s in a row. I don't know if it's a good omen or a bad omen, so we'll see. If your favorite number is 4, it could be a good time to play. But I just look at this world as money is coming in, adoption is happening at an accelerated pace, the narratives are all there, and the supply is shrinking. it just spells up to me everything. All the ingredients are there for this thing to rise. I can't see it, and I know I might be a bit of a perma bull, but I just look at all the macro and look at all the money flow charts, look at the on chain. It all spells a very positive story to me. So there's the hopium for the weekend, guys.
Yeah.
All right, don't forget, everybody, please subscribe. A couple people saying we're released. They're right down in the description below. Subscribe to these two guys. These are selfless gentlemen who give back and just want to help you out. And they all have very unique perspectives and insights that will make you a better investor or a better DGen, as we just learned as well.
That's right.
Thank you, guys. Thank you to the moderators as well in the audience. Thank you for all the super chats. We sponsor our furry friends and helpless people out there that need help. So happy weekend, everybody. Mic
Thanks,
drop.
everybody.
Bye. So hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. I am this guy. I'm so honored to be here with Jeff Booth. He is a visionary leader, lives at the forefront of a whole bunch of technologies, a whole bunch of startups, has been through a whole bunch of financial crises, understands so much about the world in which we are in today, and I want to pick his mind. He wrote a book called The Price of Tomorrow, and not only myself, but many people believe this is the book of the century. So if you don't have it, there'll be a link below, and please follow him on Twitter as well. And he's been published, interviewed by pretty much everybody on Earth. But I'm hoping we can extract a few nuggets from this man's brilliant mind. So, Jeff, how are you today?
Wow, I'm great. Thanks for having me, James. But I hope I live up to your introduction.
Oh no, well, I'm very honored to be with you because, first of all, we're kind of aligned in many ways. I do this to give back and help educate people to not only preserve wealth, but also grow it and manage risk. And I think you spend a lot of your time, your mission seems to be helping others wake up to what's going on in the world today. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's fair. It's fair to say. It's when you have everything you need. What do you? And so when as an entrepreneur, typically what an entrepreneur does is try to innovate, try to create value for other people. And so when I looked at this system level problem that we're talking about, and I was seeing no fixes for some system level problem, I had to do something. So quick thing.
So speaking of your book, so for the audience, I know many people will, hopefully most have read it. Those that haven't, they have to order it, and literally it will change the way you look at the world. But The Price of Tomorrow, could you summarize it for a 10-year-old in 2 to 3 sentences?
Sure. Technology makes everything cheaper. We live in a world that is designed differently and must make prices go up. And so you have two systems colliding against each other. And the existing system that we're in, measure everything by, we can't see the other system. And so it provides, and expand on that a little bit. So just about every problem in the world that we think is a problem is a derivative of that fight. Two systems fighting each other. And you have to ask yourself, is technology going to keep on reducing prices? Is it going to give you more? And what would the corresponding system do to try to stop that?
Yeah.
It's lonely out here for Snail. God. Hey, what? This motherfucker's not even working. Mwahaha.